For more on the fight against ISIL, we're joined by Phyllis Bennis. She is the director of the new Internationalism project at the Institute for Policy Studies here in Washington. She's also been a writer, analyst, and activist on the Middle East and UN issues for many, many years. Welcome back to the show.
Good to be with you.
You know, you heard our last report, the Kurds saying that the coalition airstrikes are working. Are they working? I mean, it seems like every day there's a change in balance here in Kobani.
You know, I think it's very interesting that the New York Times today ran a major piece on the front page of a secret CIA report that's looking back at the history of CIA efforts to use, efforts to arm and raise up, as they say, rebel forces of various sorts, like what they want to do in Syria with Syrian opposition forces. And they admit that it's never succeeded, that the air wars alone have never succeeded. And I think what we're seeing now is that this is not going to work. It's going to kill a lot of people. They say that they're all terrorists so far. Maybe they are. Maybe there are some, including some of the civilians that are left in the town. We don't really know. But it is true that what President Obama has continued to say, there is no military solution. I think that's actually true. And the question of how long this goes on, how long the U.S. bombing keeps up, how long people can't go back to their city, will they continue to bomb an empty city? It's very unclear. So the question of what does it mean to say it's working, we don't even know what that would look like at this point.
And a lot has been said about finding a political solution to this. Do you feel that's more in the right direction?
Absolutely. I think there is no military solution, and I think there has to be a political solution, both in Iraq and in Syria. In Syria, there needs to be a reopening of the UN-sponsored talks that collapsed last year. It didn't work for a host of reasons, including the refusal of the United States to allow Iran to participate, despite its major role in the region, and particularly in Iraq. It's far more influential right now in Baghdad than the United States is. So that was one of the reasons. There were others. But those talks need to be reopened. There needs to be new negotiations between the US and Russia around the question of support for the regime in Damascus. There needs to be talks between the US and Iran about what's going on in Iraq. It needs to be taken up on a regional basis. Without those kinds of serious talks that have to include new moves by the government in Iraq, the US-backed government that still doesn't have a minister of defense or a minister of intelligence, those ministries, of course, being the ones blamed for the most sectarian actions against the Sunni community in Iraq, that has led to the reasons that so many Sunnis are supporting ISIS, not because they support their extremism, but because they're willing to support them despite their extremism, because the alternative is they're being attacked with barrel bombs by their own government and by these Shia militias, very sectarian militias, that are allied with the government. So all of those political motions need to be put into play before there can be hope of resolving this.
We see all the fighting and the military strikes. We always forget that there are still civilians in many parts of this region. Absolutely. 2,000 civilians inside Kobani that are unable to get out. How do we help these people?
Well, one possibility is the additional fighters that are trying to get in from Turkey. It would be important for Turkey to allow them in. Right now, the tension between Turkey and the Kurdish population is at an all-time high for the last several years. There was reports today of the Turkish government actually bombing a Kurdish region inside Turkey. And that, of course, is going to make everything worse. That the peace process, as we just heard in your report, the peace process between the Turkish government and the PKK, the Kurdish Workers' Party, is really standing on a very narrow precipice, whether it's going to survive or not. That's making everything worse. But I think that for the civilians left, there are apparently about 700 people who are older and ill, unable to travel, and another 1,200 or so who are in the outskirts, who may have an easier time to get out. The kind of parallel that we saw with the Yazidis who were stranded on Mount Sinjar, where it was Syrian Kurds who were able to open up a corridor on the back of the mountain and escort them out. That kind of a possibility on the Turkish side might be possible if the Turkish government would release the border restrictions that are not allowing them right now to cross.
Very complicated situation. Phyllis
Indeed.
Bennis, as always, we appreciate your time.